at where we go in the next year. So just to let you know a little bit about what we're going to go over today, I'm going to cover the workflow of the platform first because it's incredibly important. The entire training and everything you need to know is based on how the workflow of the platform works. And so I want to spend some time going over that, making sure you really understand that, because everything is going to be built on that workflow. The second thing is we're going to talk about setting up a customer. We're going to talk quickly about the customer portal. Almost everybody on the phone has been through either a customer portal install, or several of them I know, or you've been through the demos, so I don't have to go over the customer portal. We have plenty of videos on YouTube around the customer portal, or on our web link here that you can see as well. So I'm going to spend literally 10 minutes or less on the customer portal. The MSP portal is where we're going to spend most of our time. This is the portal you want to use from now on. All of you have been sent your credentials. I saw most of you already activated your credentials and have been logged in and kind of poking around. Many of you already have your first customer, if not several, which is awesome as well. I know on the phone here are actually a few partners that have been around with us for almost a year. So all kind of different audiences on the call today. And we're going to go quickly over the sensor user interface as well, because every once in a while you need to debug something and you need to get into that sensor user interface. It's for things also like setting up a static interface and that type of thing other than debugging. So just to get into it. All right. So this is the start. If you're going to focus your attention on anything, make sure you really understand what the next 5 minutes of this workflow conversation is, because everything about this training and what I'm going to say for the next hour and a half is built on what I'm about to say. All right. So there is a sensor. The sensor can be our virtual machine, or it can be our hardware. The hardware is good for up to about 300 internet users per egress point to the internet. Obviously, when you get above that, you really want to move to your own hardware that you're in control of. Our hardware is 500 gig, 8 gigabyte of RAM, 500 gig hard drive, quad core Celeron. Typical Intel box. It runs Core OS, or what's called Container Linux now, and the VM is the same. To be in control of what you put on the sensor, you really would want to move to a VM. But the VM obviously has, you need to understand virtual networking to move there. But for those customers, above 300 people per egress point, when you get up to 500, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, you really want to be in control of the memory, the processing, the hard drive, because you want to be able to give it more as you grow. So those sensors, there's 2 ports on them. Either port is interchangeable. The sensor tries to figure out which one's the mirror and which one's the connectivity back home. So they do sit on the inside of the net, and they connect to the managed switch on the inside. And one of those ports, like I said, goes to just the regular switch and is our connectivity back to the cloud. It also does vulnerability scanning. The second port is for the mirror for the network IDS. And that goes the same way with the virtual sensor as well. So, obviously, that sensor runs several different engines. It runs the network IDS engine that's going to be listening for all traffic going north and south over that firewall, right? And that's what you want to mirror to us. So we're not in line. We're just watching that traffic and opening it up. We do use Suricata. If you know what Suricata is for our network IDS, we've modified it to support NetFlow, so we get NetFlow out of there. We, by default, use the emerging threats rule set. We have a NetWatcher rule set, and we are now encouraging everybody to buy Emerging Threats Pro. Emerging Threats and Cisco Talos are the 2 rule sets for network IDSs that everybody uses. They have a giant open source community. We definitely leverage that. Most everybody in the world leverages it. But we also really push these proprietary rule sets now as well, because they're holding back a great deal of the most important rules over the last several months into that pro rule set, and it's becoming just vital for anybody that is really doing a good job of security. The host IDS, this is where the endpoints come in. It's primarily file integrity monitoring. That's we use OSEC, but we use a WAZUH rule set, WAZUH.com, if you want to go read about the rule set. It's an incredible rule set. It does a really good job for PCI, for instance, but it's primarily a really good file integrity monitoring system. This is probably one of the things we'll be upgrading using Qualys here shortly, but it's currently a really good rule set as well. So when you turn on endpoints that run the NIDS module, this is the engine that they're coming into on the sensor. The host logs, this is for any endpoint, servers, desktops, laptops that are running our logs module. And we use a SEGIN engine to kind of ingest them, normalize the logs. We started with the SEGIN rule set. We now have our own rule set on top of that. As well, most all firewalls, or not, this is primarily for Linux logs and Windows logs. So think about the Windows event log. This is the syslog engine for things like firewalls. You can look on our wiki to see the 100 or so devices that we support out there. We've got quite a few. It's I believe now over 100. Most all the firewalls are supported. But we also have a lot of other devices in there that we support as well. And then also we do vulnerability scanning, and we use by default OpenVAS to do our scanning. It was the open fork off of Nessus when Tenable took Nessus private. This is one of the other places we'll likely be upgrading here shortly with the vulnerability scanning capabilities of Qualys. As well, but for now it's OpenVAS. So when any of these items, when any of these engines produce something anomalous, so we find something anomalous, an event is created, and the corresponding raw log entry or the PCAP gets sent to our cloud. You can turn off PCAPs and raw logs, which limits our ability and your ability to do forensics. That's the ability is there if you have a really tight HIPAA environment and they just don't allow that. You can turn it off, but by default, those raw logs and raw PCAPs get sent to our cloud to prove that that element happened and also allow us to do forensics. And in the cloud is where we run a whole different set of correlation rules to turn raw events into alarms if it's necessary to tell our customer about it. So the thing to keep in mind, a lot of information going into a sensor. The sensor turns that information into events. The events send it to our cloud for another level of correlation. We call level 2 correlation to turn events into alarms if required. So that is the very high level on that. There's only one deviation from that workflow, and it is if you load our net agent on a laptop and you turn on the module called Sensor in the Cloud. And this is obviously very popular because most everybody out there, when they're monitoring a network, do not monitor the assets that leave the corporate network. However, we do. It's a giant selling feature for NetWatcher. It is one of the primary reasons most people buy us, because they love this feature. So I'd encourage you all to test it, get comfortable with it, try to use it as much as possible. What it is a VPN that turns on when somebody leaves the corporate network. If the asset is on the corporate network and it sees a sensor, it turns itself off. But if it does not, it leaves itself on, so it encrypts everything going outbound over the internet from that device. You can do split route, so you can give it an IP address not to route as well. So if you're using another VPN for other purposes, you can, in a support split routing, you can do that as well. You just have to put a ticket in and let us know the IP, and we'll do the split route for you on the back end. We're opening that up eventually to partners to do that as well, but just open a ticket in the meantime. Once that goes over that VPN tunnel, it hits a NetWatcher sensor that we load for you in the cloud. This is the same type of thing locally. It currently supports a network IDS and log monitoring. It does not yet support HIDS. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. We're aggressively working on HIDS support for the sensor in the cloud. It's not there yet, but it will be eventually here. And then the workflow works like normal. It goes to our cloud correlation engine and goes and creates alarms. So that's the high level. So remember, there are all these engines. Also, the network IDS supports an engine for NetFlow as well, and the endpoint also gets all the products inventory and a bunch of other inventory off of the asset as well. Those are two subtle engines that aren't on the screen here, but we do have that data as well, and I'll show it to you. So this I went over. You've got level 1 correlation, level 2 correlation. So let's dig into the network IDS a bit. You've got your firewall. Internet comes into the firewall. You mirror port 1 that the firewall is connected into to port 4 or whatever other port 1, and the NetWatcher sensor sits on in the inside of it. The network IDS looks at a mirror on port 4 of all the traffic going over the internet. And then the other port is for everything outbound to the NetWatcher cloud. Remember, we also get NetFlow. So in this example, this caught a phishing message or a potential phishing message that it's seen, and it also saw that 100 packets were coming in from the source and 140 to the destination. That's that modification we made to Suricata. Then we might see the host pop up that clicked on that phishing message, and it says, hey, I changed the registry. And this might have occurred, 5 milliseconds or 30 minutes after that occurred. Then the endpoints say, you know what, this asset is actually now trying to authenticate to a bunch of other assets on the network. So we see that in the logs. And then we see the firewall telling us, hey, there's been this strange communication to China. We might have also seen this in NetFlow on the network IDS as well. But let's just say the firewall tells us something interesting that's going on that same asset. And then, oh, by the way, last week we did a scan via our full and fast scan, and we noticed that this had outdated flash. And so the whole goal and the real value of NetWatcher is looking at activity over time on an asset. So we saw the phish, then a little bit later, we saw the registry change, then a little bit later, we saw authentication, then a little bit later, we saw something on the firewall, and then we also saw that it was outdated flash. So we take all this activity over time and correlate it, trying to paint a picture, and that's at level 2 correlation. So if you think about it, what we're doing here is trying to automate the job of a level 1 or level 2 security person. So if you have most MSSPs out there have level 1 security people that are looking at logs, level 2 security people that those people bump up interesting issues to, that do a high level forensics, and then they punch those to level 3 people that do deep forensics. We're trying to automate level 1 and level 2 to both make our MSPs very effective at being security people, because we know that MSPs don't just do security, they do a bunch of things for their customers, so they don't have time, energy, or the ability to buy people on the market to do level 1 or level 2 because they're very expensive. So we try to automate all this. And even now we're seeing a lot of MSSPs come on board because they want to increase their margins and really scale their people. And so this is the whole thing. We're automating level 1 and level 2 engineers. So our level 3 security people or our MSPs or MSSPs level 3 security people can actually do a much more effective and efficient job. That's the whole goal. All right. So that's the workflow in a nutshell. We won't spend any more time on workflow. Spend about 20 minutes there, but everything builds on that as well. We're now going to get into setup. So most everybody's been through this before, but I just want to point a few things out here. The one is, as part of that email, when you signed up for the training, you were given a PDF. It's also on netwatcher.com. If you go up to the More tab on the right-hand corner, you can click Platform Overview. It's at the very bottom of the page there, but you can also see it here. You also have a link to it in that email. I'll pull it up here in a second. There's a partner version and an end customer version. So a lot of our MSPs expect their customers to be actually installing the sensor. And so if your customer's installing it, you probably want to give them the customer install guide. If you're doing it, we have a partner install guide. So that's the differentiator. They both map to each other. They're very kind of symbiotic with each other, but keep an eye on both of them and give them to your people. Once you install the sensor and put on the mirror port and open up any ports outbound that might need to be opened, then you deploy the endpoints and turn on NIDS and logs or sensor in the cloud on those endpoints. By the way, the Net Agent is free. You can install it on as many devices as you want. There is no cost to it. The Net Agent will give you a full inventory of the device. We encourage you to deploy it as far and wide as you physically can. We do not charge you until you turn on NIDS and logs or sensor in the cloud modules. These are the things that really use our back end from a processing and a storage capacity standpoint, so we have to charge you for them. But the Net Agent itself is free, and it gives you a giant bunch of value. Configure the syslogs. I know that most of our partners, they just want to send us the firewall syslog, which is fine. There are other things we support there. Make sure you look at that wiki page that shows you all the devices we support. But that's the next thing you need to do when you're setting up a customer. Then the next thing you do is configure vulnerability scanning. As well, we like to do a daily discovery scan and a weekly full and fast scan. We like to do it with credentials. Typically, people don't use admin credentials, they use user credentials, and they create an account for just scanning. And I'll show you that as well. Then we configure the reoccurring reports. Remember that you can put your branding on the reports and take our branding off. I'll show you that here in the training as well. And then you set up your customer contacts in the customer portal if you need to. So let's jump back here, and I just want to make sure that you see this here. Because it's real important that you see this guide. I know most everybody have already been through it, and if you did your homework, you've read it and also read the MSP version of it, but it basically takes you through all the steps that I just outlined a minute ago. And the first thing is you get your sensor. This is the hardware. The VM is at the end of the document. And you want to make sure all these ports are open outbound. This is how we communicate to the NetWatcher cloud. If the sensor does not communicate, it's probably because one of these ports is not open for some reason. The first thing you do when NetWatcher comes on is you let it get an IP address and let it download a new operating system or any changes of the rules. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then you can run netwatcher.com/setup, or you can put in a ticket. We can run it for you. Or if you're talking to one of our support people, they can run it for you. But you are in full control of running it yourself. So the first thing you have to do is set up your network IDS mirror port. This is an example doing it on a Netgear here. Netgear, very easy. You come into the mirroring section, mirror port 1, which is the firewall, to port 3, plug us into port 3. Again, it doesn't matter if it's port 1 or 2 on the NetWatcher sensor, it figures itself out. And once you've done that, the sensor light will go from amber to green. By the way, when you just plug the sensor in, if it communicates to the NetWatcher cloud, the light in the portal will be amber if it has a good connection to the NetWatcher cloud. If it goes green, that means that it can actually see the mirror traffic as well. And then you set up the syslog, then you set up the endpoints, like I was talking about, and we're going to get into this in a bit of detail in a minute. Then you set up the vulnerability scans. Again, you want to do a daily discovery scan and a weekly full and fast scan as well. And then you set up reoccurring reports for your customers. We like you to set up this situational awareness report weekly. Again, it has your branding on it. And so your customer gets that, send it to their email address. Also, you can set up notifications for your customers. I know some people on the phone don't want to give the customer portal to their customers, which is fine as well. That's up to you. But even if you don't, you may want to set up your customers in here anyway, so they can at least get a score email once a day or once a week so they know their score, or they can get really important high severity security issues via email or SMS. Now, if you do the NetWatcher virtual machine, it's the same thing. You need to open up these ports if any of them are closed down. By default, most everybody has them open. This example in here is using vSphere or ESXi. We also support Hyper-V. I will tell you, Hyper-V has a lot of challenges with container Linux. We've outlined a link to how to get around all Microsoft's bugs there. If you're going to pick a platform, I would not pick Hyper-V because of all these challenges. Has nothing to do with NetWatcher, has a lot to do with Hyper-V. Microsoft knows about all these issues and hopefully someday fixes them, but we have all the workarounds. We really encourage people to use VMware. It is very good with Linux. Again, the container is a container Linux, or other people call it Core OS. When you get into the portal here, you'll see that you can download the VM here. Always compare it to the SHA-1 hash to make sure it's downloaded well. Here, I will suggest never send somebody on site that has never done a virtual network design. We see people all the time that say, yeah, we're very good with VMware and setting up virtual machines. Virtual networking is not setting up a virtual machine. Virtual networking is understanding how to set up virtual firewalls, virtual switches, virtual routers, and being very comfortable with SPAN, being very comfortable with ER-SPAN, being very comfortable with these concepts. And we often find people that get on the phone that have done setting up VMs, but they're clueless about setting up virtual networking. So you really want to put people on site that have done this before, or referred to their VMware training or VirtualBox training, etc. Or they will have a hard time. We see it all the time with especially MSP partners that put new people on site that have never done this before. So they need to know how to set up a virtual switch. They need to know how to connect the virtual switch to a open port on the device. That sometimes becomes a challenge as well, because usually these devices only have 1 or 2 ports. They need to know how to connect that port to a port on the physical switch and create that span and then connect it to the trunk, right? That is fairly easy to do if somebody's been through that before. However, if somebody's never done it before, it is fairly daunting for them to understand. So make sure you send people on site that really understand that. You will not get much support from the NetWatcher team on how to do virtual networking. That's really something you need to go to VMware for, or Oracle, or Microsoft. We give you the items here. We'll give you guidance on what we think, but we're not going to be doing support for VMware. They give you support for VMware. Here's an example of how to set up another mirror port via Cisco. Obviously, they call it SPAN, but then it goes through how to create the virtual switch, run everything through it, and then it shows you how to set up the importing the sensor. We create the sensors with VMware Workstation. You have to convert them. There's a bunch of converters out here. We're showing you the VMware converter to convert it to a vSphere sensor that you can upload. And then once the sensor is imported, you start mapping the ports over. Once the ports are mapped, you can open up the NetWatcher console and make sure that you get an IP address, an IPv4 address. By default, you'll see the IPv6 address. Just make sure you get an IPv4 address and be at the login prompt. If you need to set up a static port, you can log in. The login for this basic menu is, and write this down, the login username is config, all lowercase. The password is config, all lowercase. All that does is give you the ability to pull up the menu. Once you're at the menu, you actually have to log into your portal to get a one-time password that rolls every 30 seconds. It's time-based, and it'll let you in to the actual menu on the sensor. It's kind of our two-factor authentication for getting into the sensors. Remember, every sensor VM is credentialized. It's unique. You can't move them around. you have to get new ones created. They're all unique, very secure the way that the design has been built. Also, if you want to do anything for VMware Workstation, we would not encourage it, but sometimes just for testing, it's something you want to do in a lab. Just ask us for a VM and we can give you one for VMware Workstation as well. If you want to go through all the headaches of Hyper-V, we give you a pointer here as well. Again, don't look for support on helping you with Hyper-V bugs. You go to Microsoft for that, but we give you a workaround for all the bugs here. Hopefully someday they fix all their bugs, but you have a pointer to how we've got around all those bugs. It's all the other platforms for VMs like VirtualBox and others, they are all fairly stable. It's only Hyper-V that we tend to have the issues with. So with that, that is all I'm going to be giving you on the install. I am now going to transition back to what we really need to get into. Oh, actually, let me give you one more here. I told you a little bit about the sensor. Make sure you're not blocking outbound ports. Make sure you plug in the sensor when you get it, let it get an IP4 address, and just start downloading any updates that it needs. I usually, turn sensors on, let them update for 30 minutes, and just so before I take them out to the customer, and just make sure it's just all updated. It limits my time if I'm at a customer. I don't have to sit around and wait for it to update. It's always a good practice to let it do that. And then once you get out on site, you can run setup like I showed you previously. And then once it's set up, once you've got Amber going on in the portal, and it's connecting back home, then you plug in the mirror port. And the reason I like to do it like this is so you're not troubleshooting multiple issues at the same time. Make sure the first thing it gets set up, it goes Amber, it's got good connectivity back home. That's a good thing to do. And then plug in the mirror port. So we're not debugging mirror port issues on connectivity issues. It's just a good practice. You don't have to do that, but it's a good practice. And then, also, I can't reiterate enough, don't put somebody on site that has never done a virtual switch and set up virtual networking. If you do that, you're going to have a giant headache. Believe me, we've seen it now 300 times. You just don't want to put somebody on site that's never done virtual networking. They will get stuck and they'll be out there for 8 hours learning virtual networking, and you don't want to, charge yourself that time. All right, so we're going to go over both portals now. I will spend 5 to 10 minutes on the customer portal first, just to reiterate what your customer would see if you give it to them. I will not go into detail here. I want to spend the majority of our time on the MSP portal, but the reason I like to do that is to compare and contrast the two. So you see in the MSP portal what you would also see on the customer portal. So I think it's important to compare and contrast these things. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time in the customer portal. Again, you've all seen it, so I don't have to go into much detail on it. You can ask questions about it later. Again, if you do have questions, make sure you use that Join Me chat here and put questions in there. We'll cover them at the end. All right, so remember, we give your customers, if they log into the customer portal, that's called a contact. Anybody that you add to the customer portal, that we refer to those as contacts. We refer to anybody that gets access on your team to the MSP portal is users. And so that's how we kind of differentiate contacts versus users. Your customers are contacts. If a contact logs in here, the first thing they see is these two scores. The scores are out of 100, 100 being the best you can get, 0 being the worst you can get. You want to keep your scores at all your customers above 80. 80 is a good, healthy place to be. Once they dip below 80, you've got issues. That means you're running a dirty network. And that means you're not managing the network, and they will get malware. So 80 is a good place to be. We also score and use this executive widget. It's on the MSP portal as well. I want you using that thing as your navigation into the platform for your help desk, your managers. It's really a great navigation tool into the entire platform. Low severity issues should be dealt with within a week. Medium issues should be dealt with within the next 24 hours. High severity issues you should drop everything and deal with them. High severity issues, if they're security issues, mean somebody's stealing off your network or your customer's network, and you better get on board to fix it. Medium and highs are typically what the incident response team needs to know about. If you're dealing with HIPAA customers or NIST 800-171 government contractors or anybody that does financial services or banking or insurance in the state of New York, those compliance regimes require you to tell the government within a certain time frame based on that compliance regime what medium and high issues are happening on those networks. And if you don't do that, you're violating federal and state law, depending on what state you're in. So we give you the ability to manage that stuff and give your ability to your customer to manage that stuff as well. It only is for security issues. So security is malware. It's exploits that are out there on the customer's network. And then policy scans and hygiene are unintentional insider threats. They're the things that make a network dirty. They're bad behavior. They are just things you want to cure on your network. Sometimes they're hard to cure because they're silly users doing silly things. But policy issues tend to be those things where they're violating corporate policies. So pornography, online gambling. The thing that we're seeing on everybody's network these days is people doing crypto mining, Bitcoin mining, crazy things like that. Everybody thinks they're going to get rich. We've also put brute force issues under policy as well. That seems to be where most of our customers want those to show up. Scans or when somebody's doing reconnaissance on the inside of your net. This is not reconnaissance bouncing off your firewall. That happens all day long, every day. Somebody is trying to break into your company's firewall. Every UTM device out there, good SonicWall device, good Sophos device, especially these Palo Alto devices, they keep people from breaking in. But when silly users let bad guys through the firewall, they figure out how to get through to scan devices. That's another thing. Or people do silly things like put RDP systems directly on the internet, which is something we see a lot of MSPs doing. It's a giant no-no in the security world unless you're doing some type of RDP gateway. You guys need to make sure you're smart about that. We've seen 5 of our recent new partners have RDP on their customers on the internet, and we see people breaking into it a lot. So just kind of be cognizant of that. Or if you're putting websites on your customer's network on the inside of the net, and so they have internal and external IP address, giant no-no in an architecture from a security perspective. So, we're going to show you all that stuff and point it out. Hygiene issues are silly behaviors we see happening on the network, typically either by IT people doing silly things like using Telnet to configure routers. It's all in clear text. Bad thing to do, or we see people in accounting sending clear text Social Security numbers over the internet. Those are things you just want to train people not to do. And again, if you click on any of these things, like here's that high security issue, we tell your users what asset it's on, description written for a person, a basic recommendation on what to do about it. From here's examples of the policy issues. Here's some crypto mining, pornography. Here's an example of scanning. Here's Shodan getting access to internal assets. That's probably an asset that has an internal and an external IP. Same for this. University of Michigan is in just about everybody's network. You want to kick them out, and here's somebody using Metasploit on internal assets. Somehow they got access internally. Here's an example of what you will see the most of. This is hygiene issues. People are still using outdated Flash, which is the #1 ransomware draw of anything out there. You want to get rid of all Flash in your networks. I realize some of your customers are using silly applications that still use it. That being said, it's from a security perspective, it's the worst thing your customer can be doing. If they do use Flash or Java, make sure you keep it updated. Here's somebody using BitTorrent. Here's somebody using a clear text password. Here's somebody using Tor. Again, these look the same as security issues. Your customer can always create a ticket with you as well. If you give them admin access, they can do things like turn things off as well. Again, from a government standpoint, if they're HIPAA or New York State or NIST 800-171, you give you the ability to put comments down here and report on those things. And that's what you can give to the government if you do a report with comments as well. Your customer also has the ability to download the NetAgent. Again, it's free. Would encourage you to put it everywhere. It gives you a full inventory of the device. And also, if you turn on logs, that's OSEC. It does the file integrity monitoring or log monitoring, that gets the Windows event log, or sensor in the cloud. That is the VPN as well. That'll turn itself on if the person leaves the network as well. The nice thing you can also do is get a score per everybody on the network. And this is nice if you have a network with 1,000 people, you can see the 10 people that are likely to cause you all the pain. This is really nice for you because you probably also do cybersecurity training for your customers. You can tell them exactly the people that need trained as well. And you can log in here and see, and by the way, you get all this with just the NetAgent loaded. You can see what build you're on, you can see what platform it is, you can see who the user is, you can see what the device is, you can actually see what all the software is. And if you wait around here for about a minute, we'll give you all the events that occurred in the last 3 months, as well as all the raw components that make up all these issues as well. Then your customer can also do their own scan jobs. Like I said, we want you to create a daily discovery scan on every customer and a weekly full and fast scan. If you click on any of these things, you click on the reports, you can open up and see the 2 reports. And if we click on one of those reports, you can actually drill into the issues here and see. This is also where you can see the details of every issue and a summary and a solution of the issue. Again, these are events that we're creating, just like NIDS events or HIDS events or SIM events. You can also download the PDF for your customer here if you want to. You do not need the NetAgent loaded on a device to scan it. The NetAgent gives you an inventory of the device, but you can still scan the device even though it doesn't have a NetAgent on it as well. So, if you don't put NetAgent out anywhere, you can still get a great deal of value from the scanning capability as well. The endpoints give you a little deeper dive on the inventory, so you can see if they have outdated Flash or if they're running some type of crazy spyware toolbar or something like that. But the scanning, you don't need that. And then all of our customers also get full access to the event tab and the asset tab, as well as the networking tab as well. A lot of customers need the asset tab because they need to do things like report on all their assets, flag some of their assets as critical infrastructure, label them as important, and you want them to do that. NIST 800-171 calls out the need for that, but also we give the customer the ability to see the pre-correlation data. We can do a simple view, which is just a list view, or group everything together. Here's the one I like to show everybody, all the inbound traffic from China or Russia on the IDS in the last week. Just like in Splunk, you can chart everything, click through this stuff, or you can drill into it as well. If you drill into it, it creates a simple query now and creates a little more detail. You just apply it and you'll see all 15 events there. You can drill into them and see who in China is talking to what asset, when to start, when to stop. You can get all the gory detail that you would expect, and even the customer can get access to the PCAPs. You as the partner, though, get access to the session PCAPs. So that's it for the customer portal. Now I'm going to compare and contrast all this to the MSP portal. So all of you should have your users. I know I sent each one of you access to the MSP portal. I see almost everybody has logged in and been around. We have a full audit capability here, so we can see who's been in, who's not been in, what you've been doing. So you have access to that audit capability as well here. I will log into here and show you. This is your view here. I'm going to choose Ocean's Edge. Here is the customer I'm going to be looking at. Ocean's Edge is part of, this is who built NetWatcher, and they allow us to do our demos here as well. So it's become kind of a standard demo account for us. And you can see here, I can see everything that I saw in the customer portal as well. And I'm going to cover a few things quickly here. The first one is I'm going to cover how this portal works. This is the navigation pane. This is the menu pane. This is the data pane. And then you have a menu pane over here on the right that is kind of a global menu. We're going to start here in this middle pane. You notice that if you compare the NetWatcher menu that's horizontal here to this vertical menu, it's pretty much the same thing, except it is a way for you to see all your customers in one place. If I did not select Ocean's Edge here and you had 30 customers in the list here, or 30 customers on board, you would see all of their issues in this executive dashboard. I tend to just keep my executive dashboard up here, but you've got all the other widgets that you can use as well. I use this executive dashboard as my way to navigate into everything across all my customers. And you can see here that if I click on one of these events, like I'm going to click on these 3 hygiene issues here, and it'll take me to the alarm tab, right? I just went from the dashboard to the alarm tab, and it's going to say, allow me to run it. And notice what the query is here. Status equals open, alarm equals hygiene, false positive equals no, visible equals yes, turned off equals no, severity equals low, informational equals no. That's the standard query. I applied it, and you see the list here. Notice I can also say this is an ad hoc search. I can name it anything I want. All low hygiene alarms, right? And I can make it global. If I make it global, my entire team will be able to see this query in the left-hand pane, in the navigation pane here. I can also create tickets. The tickets either show up on the ticketing tab or they can be sent into ConnectWise. We have an API integration into ConnectWise that most of our partners use. They take advantage of it. Feel free to do that here. Whatever is in this query here would be sent into ConnectWise if it ever trips in the future. You can also send an SMS. It will send an SMS to the phone number that you have on your user profile. It will send you an email. Now, keep in mind, this is a little bit of a design flaw we're trying to figure out how to fix. If you make it global and your entire team sees it, but make it SMS or email, only you see it. So your team actually has to set up SMS and email if they want those for that same query. So the global just gives them visibility to the query. We also have an integration into Secdo for incident response if you use that as well, and you can send issues there. Then if you click on these issues, these are alarms. Remember, we're in the alarm tab here. If you click on the alarm, it takes you to the alarm detail page. And notice we go to the alarm detail page. This is an outdated Java alarm. This is the same thing your customer would see on this detail page here. It's the same thing that you would see into ConnectWise. ConnectWise also gives you a link to get into here if your help desk people need to get in here. And they can always click on this and see what your customers see in their customer portal. They can also see any comments that you might want to leave here. This, again, is what you would do for NIST 800, 171, HIPAA, or New York State's law. You can post a comment here as well for those, and then you can report on that. You can see the asset here, the MAC address and the IP address of it. You can look at related events here as well. I'm going to open up related events. These are the events we correlated on. So remember, the events came off the sensor, went to the cloud, got correlated, and we decided we needed to make an alarm out of this issue. I'm going to drill into the first one here, and you can see something really interesting. I am now into the event page. This is the event detail for that event. I'm going to go back though. Sometimes when you go back, you got to resubmit here. This is been plaguing us for a while. We'll actually get around to fixing that. There's an architectural flaw that we need to get over. So just refresh it if you use the back button and you get that issue. I want to show you a couple things on this alarm detail page that are really important. Little box up here, the action box. This is where you close an alarm. That means if you close it, it goes away, comes out of the score, right? You have to be a partner admin to close it. Or you have to give your user access to the ability to close alarms. So if you close it, if it happens again, we reopen it. If you don't want that to happen, you have to turn it off. If you turn it off, you can turn it off at the asset level, the customer level, or all of your customers. Be very careful about doing that. Now, we keep storing these. We can see them on the back end. You just can't, your customers can't see them. If you want to see them, you just have to say that you want to see turned off alarms. You also get a tab here to see turned off alarms. You can assign it to a user. Once you start getting 30 customers or more, you're probably going to have to do a thing where one person looks at all alarms and starts assigning them to people. So you can assign them. When that user logs in, they're going to see a little, I've got one unacknowledged alarm here, and here's what it is. And they can drill into it and come to this page. If they say acknowledged, it goes away from the acknowledged. That means that the person that doles all these out can see that the person saw it. That's one way to do your workflow internally from an analyst or a help desk standpoint. You can notify one of your contacts that this has occurred. Maybe you want to let your customer know about this. You can also create a ticket from right here, and it'll open up a ticket. If you have ConnectWise connected, it would open up a ConnectWise ticket. You can mark it as false positive. Happens once in a while. If you do that, that's an important thing for our analysts to look at. Try to make the rule better. So please do that if you do see a false positive. Please do not mark things that you just want to close or turn off as false positive. That becomes a giant pain for our guys because we do look at false positives trying to make our rules better. Mark it as acknowledged. That's what a user does. Or you can save it as an ad hoc search, and it pins it over here as well. We're going to get to this in a second because these are valuable. So that's a good way to use workflow. But let's drill into this now. Go back here, drill into the event. This is just one event that we correlated on to figure this out here. Now notice I'm in the event tab here, and I'm in the event detail page. I see source, destination, MAC address. Notice the MAC address here is for Juniper, right? That means it had to go, you know, obviously you got to know your networking here. You got to understand your OSI model. You know that if this is probably the asset, the real true MAC address of the real asset, this is the MAC address of the next hop. The next hop has to be probably your router. And this is the external IP, this is the internal IP. Internals say local next to them, externals usually give you the country. If we can get the host name, we do. If we can get the host name internal, we do. You can also look at additional information. We try to get the header of the packet for you. Notice we got the header of this packet. It's the URL that we picked up noticing it was outdated flash. You can see all the other elements in the header of the packet. We also, remember, we get the net flow on everything for a network IDS packet. Always look here. Packets in, packets out. That means it tells you how much traffic there was. Tells you how many bytes there was. It's an important thing for somebody to look at here. All right. You can also see whether or not this flow is closed or is it still open. Might still be going on, right? Also, I'm going to come back to this. You can download the one PCAP that we're storing to prove this is what it is. Remember, you can turn that off if you want to. You can see the raw hex from that packet. We open it up. When your help desk people get really good at this, they can quickly look here, compare it to the rule, figure out whether or not this was a really valid thing. Our guys, they live and die here. They live and die at the session PCAPs. You look at the asset, you can see the related alarm. Also, the nice thing you can do is all the other related events that ever occurred on that asset within the day, within the week, whatever, right? And they can look at it here. Sometimes you want to look at the entire session that created this. Maybe you want to see everything that ever occurred on this session. And so you remember this was 7 packets in, 7 out, and you want to look at all of them. So you can say create file request, send file request, and it'll bring up the packets if and only they exist on the hard drive of the sensor. When you do that, it asks the hard drive of the sensor to send back the packets. If you get an error, they were no longer on the sensor. They rolled off. The sensor hard drive is a FIFO for all inbound and outbound packets that are occurring for the network IDS. I was able to catch this, and I can download it. You always want to have Wireshark loaded. I can open it up in Wireshark, and I can see those 14 packets here. For those of you that aren't good security analysts yet, when you're looking at a Wireshark thing and you also see an HTTP packet, you can right-click on it, say follow, and go down to HTTP stream, and it gives you the entire conversation in HTTP. Any good analyst, this is where they live, right, to see what happened here. And you can see, what the URLs were, what they were doing, what they got back, right? And you can see whether or not what ended up happening here as well. An analyst lives and dies off of these session PCAPs, right? The PCAP that shows you why it tripped is interesting. All the other activity on that asset is interesting. The real story is in the session PCAP, and that's really what we're after. That's what our level 3 guys are after doing. And that's where they spend all of their time. Our partners that are really good do this as well. Up to you whether or not you want to get into this level. We find that our MSP help desk partners tend to get curious, and the more and more curious they get, they go in here more and more and more, and within 6 months, they're all security people. We've got a lot of compliments from our MSP partners that their help desk people are now security people. So that could be a good and bad thing, because if it's bad, they realize how much they're worth in the market. It's up to you whether or not you really encourage them to go there. So I'm going to go back here for a second, and I want to show you a really valuable thing. I'm going to hit on events here, and you're going to see an event query here. These event queries, just like in the customer portal, can be very good at figuring things out. Maybe you want to look at when Sam in accounting is doing pornography, or when you see this certain IP address come inbound from China. Maybe you're after something here, or maybe you just want to see everything on the IDS in the last day. And maybe you just want to see a list of those things. Or maybe you want to group everything together and see everything on the syslog that might be Windows Auth related in the last day. And maybe you want to save the ad hoc search, make it global, send yourself an SMS if it ever trips in the future, send yourself an email if it ever trips in the future. Or maybe you just want to save it over here. And if you do that, it saves it over here under events. Remember, these are the pin searches. They're really important to do. You can also pin tickets, you can pin assets, you can pin vulnerabilities as well. You can also pin customers over here. I've pinned Ocean's Edge over here, so it's easy to go to. I would encourage you, until you get up to about 30 customers, to pin all your customers over here, so it's just really easy to navigate. You can always go in here as well and hit that global search and type in Ocean's Edge. And I can come in here and just choose the little deals here and say, okay, Ocean's Edge. And grab them there, and then, or I can just pin it here. I would encourage you to really use these pins as well. And so I've got a few things to give you here. I created a few different queries for you before this. I'm going to throw them into the Join Me chat here for you. And a lot of times partners really like these things, so I'm going to put them in there for you. And there's some fun things to do. Like, we'll just take the first one. Let's just take authentication events. Sometimes our partners like to see, who's authenticating out there. I'm going to throw that URL in here. I'm going to hit it, and it'll pull up a saved query here as well. And you can see it's everything for the last day on the syslog that's Windows Auth related for this customer, Ocean's Edge. But I'm going to do the last 3 months. That might take a little bit of time. Okay, here they are. There's quite a few of them. Remember, this is kind of a test customer here, but I can see 2852 of successful logins. That's not too cool, but I want to look at unsuccessful logins. Bad passwords, there's 42 of those. Now I click into it and it goes from the grouped query to the single query, and I apply that, and I see all 42 events. And now I can see, okay, I'm going to drill in here and figure out what the raw log looked like. And this is not a network IDS event, this is a raw log event. This looks like it came off of the Windows event log, right? And I can see here what the asset is. I can look at the log in here to see it. And I can, make some deductions about it as well. So play around with those saved queries. We use them, our analysts use them all day long, every day. The interesting ones there. The interesting alarm queries that we typically see partners do are, everything maybe that is visible from a security perspective. You might want to throw that into ConnectWise by clicking X and setting up ConnectWise for you. It's up to you. Most of our partners have a bunch of event queries. Our analysts have a whole boatload of these event queries here. Like I have a few saved ones here that I find interesting. All malware, all executables downloaded from outside the U.S. Is always an interesting one here. Let's just throw it up so you can see it. Here they all are, and I throw it up. I don't have any. Maybe I want to save for the last month. And see if we have any for the last month at this customer. Sometimes these queries take a long time to run. No, I don't have any. Be very careful about how much data you ask for as well. If I will tell you, if the query lasts for more than 5 minutes, we kill it. Right? It's just a bad query. It's, we don't want the performance hit on the back end. Try to make your queries smarter if they're going to take more than 5 minutes is what it really comes down to. Be very good about how you make the query there if you're at this level. All right, so NetFlow. Remember, we get NetFlow out of every network IDS event. Maybe, you're looking for a certain IP address. The queries I see people do is a date range of last day, source IP of a certain destination IP. See, I made it or, so it's either one. I apply that, and I can see here that there's some traffic back and forth from that IP address. I can look at the NetFlow analytics here to see how much data there is. We're building this out. It'll be much more complex and put a bunch of pretty charts in here for you eventually. But right now, it's just the network IDS NetFlow. Not a whole lot of value, but I use NetFlow in events mostly. I tend to never go into this NetFlow tab unless I'm really looking for how many packets are going back and forth between an IP. All right, vulnerability scanning. Here you'll see that I pinned vulnerability scanning, all high vulnerabilities here, and that's this query here. I just went in and saved it, and I said make it global. I said you can create a ticket from it, so any high vulnerabilities coming in the future can go into ConnectWise. You can send yourself a text, email, or just make it a safe search here. Severity equals greater than 8, that's high. Greater than 4 is mediums and highs. You can do accept risk equals no, or false positive equals no. If you come down here and say that's a false positive, right? You come in here and say that's a false positive, you have to give it a reason. Say I just don't like it, and say okay. You run the query, it goes away. It's a good way to kind of manage all of your vulnerabilities across all of your customers. We also have some great reports with all this stuff as well. So that's how you see all the vulnerabilities that are run. How you create a scan job and how you add credentials in is another thing. If you're going to use credentials, here's our admin credentials. Here's a scan. If you're doing SSH scans, create a different set of credentials in here. as well. A lot of our folks have a bunch of credentials in here. And then scan configs, you probably don't want to go here unless you know what you're doing with OpenVAS. Just use our defaults, like a daily discovery scan, a weekly full and fast scan. Never do deep and ultimate scans on production networks. Never, ever, 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 ever do that. You will knock those devices offline. You only want to do that for things you're beta testing. Maybe you're putting a server into production, something like that. You simply name your scan job, choose your customer, choose the sensor at your customer, choose the creds if you need them, choose the scan. This is where a daily discovery scan comes in. But if we're going to use credentials, you probably want to use a full and fast. You can exclude hosts. For discovery scans, you always want to do a full network scan. It'll go through the entire range. Don't do it for a full and fast scan because it's very slow. Full and fast scans happen after discovery scans. They use the database of the discovery scan. Uncheck that box there. You probably don't want to create a report for a discovery scan, but you do want to create a report for a full and fast scan. You can have the report sent to you at your email address. Right? Do that. You can upload it to custom storage. We use eAnchor for our custom storage. We'll eventually use other things as well. You can auto-generate a report for your customer as well if you want to. Here is where you give the IP address of the network. You might want to, you always have to use the CIDR there. Don't forget this. It's /24. I'm sorry, but you know what I was meaning. And when you add that, you can also just choose the network, or you can choose the assets that you want to scan here as well. Now, a couple things to remember for you partners on the phone. If you are running our sensor internal to your company, you can also do external scans for your customer. And that's where you put the customer's, external IP addresses if you want to scan them. The reports show up in your portal, and you have to send those reports to your customer. I would do a daily discovery scan on the IP first, or not a daily. I do a one-time discovery scan first, and then a full and fast scan, credentialized or uncredentialized, on it as well. So once you do all this and the scan jobs run, there's a couple other things you as partners can do that your customers can't do. And I'm going to show it to you here. So let's see, here's all the scan jobs that are run, all the reports that are run. Let's just pick one that ran twice. We'll pick this little test here. I don't know if it had anything. 29 vulnerabilities. You can do a delta scan. So it's really nice to kind of, scan one week, fix things, scan another week, and do a delta report on what the differences is between the two. And we'll show you all the deltas here. Maybe you're only interested in severity equals mediums and highs. So you can do that as well. So you just put in 4 there. Just look at the mediums and highs, create the report. If you create the report, it shows up under your reports, and also gives you a link here where you can jump into your reports and get it as well. Under your reports, you can see it's already completed here, and you can download it and look at it. And there is the Delta report, and there's only a few things to worry about there. If you create a report, though, you can also do a much more detailed vulnerability report for your customer as well over a certain set of time. So that's available as well. Or you can do vulnerabilities across all your customers, which leads me to the create customer report. This is if you're creating reports for one customer. This is if you're creating reports across all your customers. So play around with it. It's kind of interesting to do. And so that's that. Tickets. These are tickets that are coming in from your customers. So you can read them here and deal with your customers. If you're going to use them in ConnectWise, you probably just want to use them in ConnectWise. I'll show you here. I actually have another. I just set up for our Qualys Help Desk team, a little portal here. So I want to log into it, I think. I can. This works. I just set up right before I logged in. It does work. And the reason I want to show you this portal is because ticketing is different in here. If you're going to create ticketing, make sure, remember, if you're communicating with us, don't send us emails, even though sometimes we answer them. Our whole team gets the tickets, so you're going to get lucky if you get us to respond via an email. But if you create a ticket, say send ticket to NetWatcher, it's got to be a question. We charge you for anything that's an incident at your customer. Incidents are security problems that we help with. We do charge you $37 an incident as well, but questions we always answer. And give us the priority of it. Say what you want to say here, and give us the subject of it. If it's at a customer, tell us what customer it is as well, and attach things to it if you need to. But use this ticketing and say send ticket to NetWatcher. If you're asking us a question, it goes to the whole help desk team here as well. And so that's the way you communicate with us. We have a whole kind of protocol for how we deal with tickets internally. So this is the best way to get a response from us as well. The other thing I want to show you here, now that I'm over here, is this global tab here. Obviously, your user profile is where you can set up some triggers for yourself. It's where you can change your password. It's where you set up some of your stuff about who you are, where you're at. You can set up some generic alerts, like if you want to see all security issues of a certain priority sent to you via email, you could as well. You can also see some custom searches you may have created here, and this is where you change them or delete them. The pin searches that you might have over here. A couple other things is this is where you set up your users. If you're a partner administrator, you can create users as well. Just say create new as well for other people on your team. You can see what roles we have here. You can't set up customers. We have to set up your customers for you. There's a protocol when you bring a customer online that you work with Lauren, our sales manager, to do. She has a form you fill out when you have a new customer. We set up the customer for you and set up your billing, which you would also see here, and you can see the start of the account and the end of the account as well. Most important thing for you here is partner settings. Partner settings is where you put the user account that you want to get notifications for. If your customer sensors go down or have trouble with their mirror ports, we will send you an email if your email settings are correct in here. And so you want to make sure you choose and add your customers or your setting emails here for anybody on your team or your support email address to know your customer sensor went down or it's having trouble. Also, your branding here. This is where you put your branding on reports. Notice I uploaded a logo for Qualys here. This is the little logo that goes on reports. This is a big logo that goes on reports. And this is the URL that goes on the bottom of the reports. This is what you want to put your branding on here, so your reports have your branding on them as well. You can also see our rule sets running here. You can also see the sensors on your customer as well from a debugging standpoint. I'm going to click on this Ocean's Edge, or no, this Qualys sensor here, and I'll click on it so you can see. Sometimes when you're debugging a sensor, notice this one's red, it's offline. You might want to go in and say, why is that offline? And you can drill into it. You can see the last event here, when it was created. You can drill into some detail here as well. It's going to try to do some connectivity there. I don't want to wait around for it to stop my flow, but you can start debugging a sensor there as well. Now I'm going to jump over here to assets. Remember, we try to categorize every asset that you have on the network. If it has a net agent, it has a little gear next to it. You can always drill into the asset and see everything, or drill into the gear and look at the net agent data as well. And remember, if you're looking at the net agent data, you can actually see what software they have online as well. So I'm drilling into the issue, then I'm going to drill into the net agent item here, and I can see that, don't worry about this little net agent not found That's a bug that creeped in about a month ago, and our guys just haven't got around to fixing it in the backlog yet. But if this is a net agent that's just being used for inventory purposes, it doesn't have any modules installed on it, so there's no detail on it as well. And then syslogs are another thing here. Syslogs are, I've got the router or the firewall switching to Wi-Fi here, but this is the firewall, the most important one. If you click on this OE sensor here, you actually can see the rule set that we actually have on the sensor as well. It goes into the sensor detail, and you can see the sensors live. Its RSM's been up for about 15 hours. You could look at the syslog questionnaire, and it shows you what rule sets we have turned on. This has the Cisco rule set and the DNS mask rule set. If, remember, we have 100 other rule sets. If you don't see something here and you do see it on our support page or wiki support page, just ask us to turn it on. By the way, it's probably a good time for me to show you that wiki support page. Just come into our wiki and type SIM. Our wiki is support.netwatcher.com /HEN-US.search. I'll throw this into the chat session here so you have it. Just type SIM, look for device log support, and you will see it. And you can look at all the different rule sets that we have here. Most all firewalls and couple other really cool things as well. Other things to look at on the sensor detail page as well are some, when is the last event? When is the last flow? What's the last heartbeat? Remember that if it's green, we can see the network IDS traffic. If it's amber, we can see the connectivity to it, but can't see the IDS traffic. If I look at state here, I can also, the last time we updated all the state information, like when all the containers were updated, what the IP addresses are. I can look at the packet count. You always want to look at the mirror port and say, if it's packet count 10,000, it means we've got a nice strong stream here. We keep it at 10,000. It might be higher than that, but 10,000 lets us know that it's strong. And we have got a bunch of internal rules set that if that goes down, we can do something about it. So if it's below 10,000, you probably have issues. Now, on weekends, it might go to below 10,000. Not that worried that if it goes yellow on weekends, nobody's in the office. But, during the week, if that's less than 10,000, you probably have issues. You can also see when the last container was updated as well. Remember, we're using Docker for everything. You can always log in to do it. You can also see the MAC addresses and the IP address and the external IP address of the company as well here. And you can also see all the assets, all the net agents that are running, that asset has picked up in its inventory as well. So that's it for the sensor page. And last but not least, I think I wanted to show you networks. So that's over here, networks. With your customers, by default, we set up all the default networks. So 192.168, 172.16, 10.0.0, and the default IPv6 address here. But sometimes you might want, and this helps with scanning, it helps with searching, it helps with reporting. Sometimes you want to set up your DMS, your DMZ network, or your Wi-Fi network, or you might want to put another network in here. Don't delete our default networks, okay? A lot of people do that and screw themselves up, and we have to go in and fix it. Just leave the default networks in there, please, and just add other networks in here. Like you come in, you choose the sensor, and put, maybe the DMZ's 168.25.7/20, whatever, 24 for just example purposes. You flag as an internal, right? And so it's important to flag it as internal so we'll know it's internal. A lot of MSPs or MSSPs in the past forgot that, and all of a sudden we're looking at all this internal traffic and thinking it's external, and all of a sudden you got bells and whistles going off everywhere. So don't make that mistake there. You want to set up your networks appropriately. Like we have a library that has about 80 locations. They have a network set up for all 80 locations. It just helps them get around, and it helps them navigate things. They have a sensor in each location, so it's a nice way for them to bounce around in there as well. And they have an MSP that it helps them do things as well. So that being said, that is it for that. I'm going to now kind of bounce down to the end here and show you the sensor. Then I'm going to open up for some questions. This is the, if you log into the sensor, you can put a keyboard and a monitor on the sensor and get into this. Remember, the user account passwords config. You need a one-time passcode. You get it on the sensor page. Let's go back to the sensor page. And I'll show you that here as well. So we're on the sensor page. You get this one-time passcode right there, 734504. It's only good for 30 seconds, and it rolls every 30 seconds. So if we caught it on the 29th second, it's going to roll. Well, you need that passcode to get into this interface here. Once you're into the interface, you can change your static interface. You can view your interfaces. You can also look at running containers. Sometimes people say, hey, am I getting my syslog device, right? If you want to know that, put number 7 here, which is tail Docker containers, and choose our syslog, and you can see whether or not you've got your syslog information coming to the sensor. It's a nice way to debug that. But that's it. The sensor interface, very easy to use, kind of Linuxy, because it is Core OS. We've kind of locked it down so you can't really do any damage to it. If somebody got a hold of it, they couldn't even get into it without the one-time passcode. So there's really no damage that they can do to it. But if you need to administrate it, set a static up, or debug it for some reason, that's how you start doing it. All right, so that being said, I am done with the training. I am now going to turn off the recording, and I'm going to open up for anybody to answer questions. So let me stop the recording here.